observing my dad, Almus Jamil Sami. He served the public with honor as owner of a publishing company. He was a mentor, worked with at risk youth, and a part of the public good and service, even to the end of his life. I did not get much time with Mr. Felper, but do recall meeting him. He had a very sweet, humble energy about him. I remember my dad thought the world of him and was influenced by him, only clear to me as I began continuing to research on him later. Dad for years told me that Felper was a POW in World War II. He also told me that he wrote stories that showed up on Hogan's Heroes. Come to find out, he was also a self published author in the 50s and 60s, starting with his first book talking about his vacation at Mooseburg. That was a joke of a name, but it was him actually being imprisoned in a stalag after being shot down in World War II. Sergeant Bill Laverne Ostrander. I knew Mr. Ostrander for 6 years during my favorite years in my childhood. He to me was known as the handy, elderly, cross the street neighbor with trousers, white A t shirt, and suspenders, always doing woodwork in his garage. I remember three key moments special to me about him from the age of 9 to 13. He had many conversations with my dad. This one in particular with my dad explaining that I was having a tough time as in public school and was switching to homeschooling. Given that at that time my family was doing this, it was just becoming legal in Texas. So picture my parents being judged for doing something they had convictions was the best for their son. Not from any neighbors did we get any judgment, including Mr. Ostrander, but enough concern for my dad was given that he could be arrested for doing this once the school reported that I was no longer in school there. We were still recovering from being homeless when I reflect back on this time. Shortly after I first began homeschooling, Mr. Ostrander, a couple weeks later, shows up with a beautiful handmade cherry lacquered personal desk with a raising door to put my smaller books and supplies. He always seemed nice and caring, and still with a no frills, no nonsense attitude kind of guy. I learned later back then about him being a student of World War II history and his prized trench knuckle knife collection. He even once found a flattened pineapple grenade in one of the stacks of history books that he bought from somewhere making the local news. When I was 11 or 12, I got into a fight with a kid that was taunting me, and I took concussive ground and pound on the asphalt before my older sister called it off thanks to my best friend Nick. Mr. Ostrander rushed down the street to check me out when I got up. He brought his pen light and checked my pupils for signs of brain injury and complimented me with his thick framed glasses, saying, "Man, you're really tough. I saw him beating you and your head bouncing off the ground. Go get some ice on your head." I remember bursting my little chest out in pride after his words. The second of my treasured memories was when my dad bragged to him that he was going to give me a rites of passage for cultural heritage and to signal to me my beginning the process of becoming a man. Mr. Ostrander offered to have his lawn taken care of and watched over me from the distance to have something physical that I needed to actually accomplish while I was low energy from fresh juice fasting for that week only for food. As I look back, as a parent who created a rites of passage for my son and daughter as well, Mr. Ostrander was being a masculine support to me for my dad outside of my family, which was very important to the process. Master Gunny Sergeant Edward Von Gentry, Marines. Edward Von Gentry was born January 1938 to the late Grace Gentry and the late Everett Vaughn in Bastrop County. He attended and graduated from George Washington Carver High School in McGregor, Texas. After graduation, he enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps and he served 30 years. In my personal memory, he was the straight sense, down to earth talking Mr. Gentry. He was always found from early in the morning to 7 p.m. ish with his garage door open in overalls, helping people with their lawnmowers. He was always respectful and never shared his opinion, even to me, unless asked as a 14-year-old or as a man years later when I'd come to visit him after some MLK March days before COVID. Remembering those conversations, I remember him mentioning to me small items humbly mentioned to me in specific questions. I had to ask him very specific questions to get anything from him. Uh, I didn't know very much about his exact work that he did as a veteran, but he was in E9. Only did I find this out in researching him. He never told me that he was a senior E9. That's incredibly surprising and talked about his humbleness for me. Further, that this was the highest technical expert position at his position in the Marines. One day he walked over to me across the yard, which is very unusual because I rarely saw him walk off of his property, and gave me a fruit sized paper bag with something inside. He quickly walked back with no explanation, like it was not to be said or talked about further. Feeling the vibe, and I just took his cue and then looked into the bag later to see what it was, and it was found to be his medals. When I think back to the look in his eyes when we talked, I always saw respect and admiration of my family. Since this is my first time doing this kind of production, I also wanted to take time to acknowledge my Uncle BC, or Uncle Bruce. He passed away a few years ago as well. He's also a veteran, a Vietnam veteran. He also served in South Korea and Germany. He was a bull rider after he got out of the military. He did interact with and receive command from the first command of the legendary General Colin Powell. He was always a person that had a positive attitude, even in the middle of a difficult environment that he and my dad grew up in. This is to you, Uncle BC.